program, we're going to be talking about AI. We have two colleagues from Facebook who will be talking, taking us through this interactive session. I would like Roberto, Gerald, can you please introduce yourselves? Fazana?
Sure, I am Gerald Soa. I'm originally from Ghana, but based in the Dublin office of Facebook.
I think you're on mute, Gerald. I can't hear you.
I can hear him.
Is everyone okay?
I can hear you, Gerald.
Okay, so I'll go on with the introduction. I'm based in the Dublin Facebook office and I work on the content policy team. I'll be joining Olalade and Nobeto and Fazana and speaking to you about AI in this context, as well as how our policies fit within the context of content moderation and artificial intelligence. Looking forward to a fruitful discussion. Handing over to Nobeto.
Yes, hello everyone, and pleasure to be here, and thank you to the organization for having us. I'll be leading the first part of this session. My name is Norbert Andrade. Yes, Lola, we can.
I can't.
You can hear us?
Anything.
Oh, okay. I
Sorry.
think it's maybe on your
Roberto,
side.
Please go ahead and introduce yourself as well. I can't hear anything, but it seems like you can hear me.
Yes.
Not sure why.
We can hear you. As I was saying, my name is Norbert Andrade. I'm Facebook's global policy lead for AI ethics. I'm based in the US and part of the public policy team. I'm here accompanied by my colleague Farzana, who will also introduce herself very briefly. So over to you, Faz.
Hi everyone, I'm Farzana, or you can call me Fuzz. And as Norberto said, I work with him in the AI global policy team. I'm based in London, so we're all coming at you with very different time zones here. I'm very happy to be here. Cool. I think Lola is going to try and rejoin Norberto, so you can go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we should just, so let's just go ahead. Let me share my screen and walk you through, the host disabled participant screen sharing. So I actually cannot share my screen, which is a problem. So we'll need to ask the host, I don't know if that was Lola or someone else from the conference organization, to give me, okay, I can do it now, I see it. Okay, so let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, so for the first, let's say 40 minutes or so, I will walk you through an interactive session. So we're actually going to be building a hate speech classifier, leveraging AI technology, and I'll be asking you to do a couple of tasks for us. So hopefully this will be lively and interactive, and the idea is to expose you to some of the challenges that companies have when putting together and building this type of automated systems to detect, in this case, hate speech in our platform. But before that, I will give you a quick and very brief introduction to artificial intelligence and machine learning, and give you also some insights into how we at Facebook use this technology. So let's get started. Let's see. Okay, so as most of you are probably aware, AI is right now a very hyped term, seems to be everywhere. And more than a science, AI is actually a general purpose technology. It means that it actually transforms every field and sector that it enters. So, and we all know that more and more organizations across all sectors are using AI, and they're using AI basically to make or to support decisions that may have an impact on our lives. So a lot of decisions about individuals. Machine learning systems, which is a type of artificial intelligence technology, is really being increasingly embedded into many different aspects of our lives. And this can be healthcare, can be finance, can be social media, transportation, education, you name it. So AI is increasingly informing decisions that have an immediate impact on us. So, for example, whether or not you may get a loan from the bank, a sentence in the justice system, or whether a business decides to interview or hire you. All of those decisions are increasingly being supported by artificial intelligence. So besides the shiny part of AI, we should take into consideration how impactful it is right now in all of our lives. In terms of Facebook, AI is really foundational to everything that we do at Facebook. It's really a core infrastructural component of all the different products and services that we build and deploy. AI can help us make existing products better, can create entirely new experiences, and as we'll see, is also absolutely instrumental in keeping people safe on our platform. As an example of how AI is at the core of our engineering efforts, you can see that AI is actually behind some of the most used features on Facebook, such as newsfeed using AI to rank content, AI used to power our search engine, AI used to face recognition. So more and more so, all of our products and services are leveraging this technology. Apart from being an important part of our engineering efforts and of our products and services, AI also plays a very important role in helping to keep our community safe and to help enforce our community standards. Community standards, and Gerald is the expert here, but they are basically, and he will talk at length about this, but just for the sake of this presentation, community standards are the sort of rules that determine what is allowed or not in our platform, what stays up or what comes down. So AI actually plays a very important role in helping us enforce our policies, our community standards. As part of our Facebook transparency report, there is a report we call the Community Standards Enforcement Report that shows and demonstrates how we're using AI to enforce our policies against, for example, adult nudity or sexual activity, fake accounts, hate speech, terrorist propaganda, child nudity, so and amongst many others. So this report is actually a very interesting read, because it basically shows to the readers how we at Facebook are leveraging this type of technology to keep the community safe and to enforce this very same standard. So, for example, how much content people see on our platform that violates our standards. This is information that can be checked through this report. How much content we have actually removed. So how much content was actually actioned. And most importantly, for artificial intelligence, this report also shows how much content we detected proactively using AI, meaning how much content we action before having people that actually are using Facebook reporting it. So before any human being would see this type of content, we can actually use AI to proactively detect that type of content. And as we're getting better and better, and as the technology improves, we're actually at a over 97% proactive rate, meaning of all the content that has been actioned, 90% of it was detected proactively by AI. So without having to rely extensively on user reports, we can actually use this technology to enable people to interact in our platform without seeing or engaging with this type of negative content. So another thing that I wanted to to quickly touch upon is some basics around artificial intelligence. But taking a step back and understanding what are algorithms, before actually getting into artificial intelligence. Algorithms at the most basic level can refer to any type of decision-making process. And this decision-making can be digital, but can be also not digital. So there are mechanical processes that can actually be seen and depicted as algorithms. So see algorithms as a set of rules that define a sequence of operations that at the end of the day achieve a specific output. So let's be more specific. A chicken soup recipe can actually be an algorithm. It has a set of instructions that if you follow, you will end up with an output. That would be a delicious chicken soup recipe. So algorithms are not more than this set and sequence of operations, of instructions that will lead to a certain outcome. Now, what are machine learning algorithms? And this is what is at the core of artificial intelligence and machine learning. The difference might be subtle, but is pretty impactful and important. Machine learning algorithms, contrarily to the algorithms, they learn on their own, meaning that they do not actually follow a set of predefined instructions. They actually create their own instructions by being exposed to data. So contrarily to algorithms, they are not deterministic. They do not need to follow a step-by-step predefined process in which they follow instructions. They actually are exposed to data and they create their own instructions in order to understand what to do with that data. And this is what is at the core of how impactful this technology is, and also of some of its concerns. So as you can imagine, and while there are obviously and undoubtedly benefits to using AI, there are also risks. And some of the risks can be defined as the risk of opacity. That this has to do with the complexity of AI as a technology. It is in certain instances, namely what we call deep neural networks, can be so complicated that these systems can operate as sort of like black boxes. So it would be difficult for people that are impacted by these systems to actually understand how those systems reached their decisions or recommendations. So this is one source of concerns, and that's why there is so much activity around academia and governments and private sector on tackling this problem by finding ways to interpret and explain machine learning algorithms. The other one has to do with the loss of human oversight. So as I just explained, what is particular and peculiar about machine learning algorithms is that they learn on their own. So if, for example, in a very simple example, if you want to build a machine learning system to identify dogs in images, in videos and photos, you would not actually have to predefine and describe the dog to the machine. What you do is actually you expose the machine to a number of photos and videos of dogs, and the machine learning system by itself, by understanding patterns and correlations in that data set, will learn on its own what is a dog and what is not. So there is not a predefined programming exercise that goes into training machine learning algorithms. Is about exposing them to that data, and they will do the work on their own, finding those correlations, those patterns, and understanding what a concept of dog is, so that they are able to identify dogs once they are trained in images that they have never seen before. And obviously this raises the issue of like loss of human oversight, because these machines do not need that predefining work made by humans. They actually learn on their own. So in order to keep those systems responsible and accountable, it's important to, depending on the level of risk and the decisions that are made by those systems, to have a human in the loop. So this is a way, or human oversight. So this is something that is actually being studied and assessed on how can we keep forms of oversight over the systems, given this risk of loss of human oversight. The other concern has to do with the impact and consequences of these systems. As I explained at the beginning, AI is actually associated with very important decisions that have a great impact on our lives. And it's important that those decisions are fair and equitable. So it's another source of concern to make sure that the decisions that are made are actually not discriminatory or biased against certain groups of people. Very quickly, when we talk about AI, and namely at Facebook, it basically boils down to what we call a classifier. So here we have kind of an animation of what an image recognition classifier is. So basically, you take an input image, it goes through the classifier and returns a set of probabilities telling what that image is about, to what extent that image fits within a specific class. The same thing can be said about a text understanding classifier. So the same exercise can be seen here, as you also start from an input data. In this case, would not be a photo, but it would be a piece of text, goes through the classifier that will return a set of probabilities of what that text is about. Okay, so this was the first part, just to level set on the basics of AI and machine learning, how we're using it at Facebook. Now let's get to the fun part, and this is an interactive exercise that, for context, we normally do in physical workshops with people in the room. So this is kind of an experiment that we're trying to do this online, and let's see how it goes. So what is this interactive about? So basically, take into account this exercise of having an input, a classifier, and the output, and let's apply this to a specific use. So let's imagine that you're actually asked to build your own social media platform, and as you have people joining that platform and posting content, you might encounter the challenge of, how can I moderate this content, because some of them can be harmful, can detract people from actually engaging with others. So how can you do this while growing your social media platform? How can you do this at scale? You've heard about AI and machine learning, and you kind of decide, so let's have a go at that. Let's actually use machine learning to help detect hate speech in my platform, so that we can create a safe environment for its members to exchange information, knowledge, and engage in the platform. So how do you do that? So how do you actually build a hate speech classifier? So first, actually, what you need is to find examples of content that should be allowed, that would not be considered hate speech, and examples that should be deleted from the platform. So basically, what you need is to feed the machine with examples of hate speech and examples that are not hate speech. And based on that data and that correspondent classification that we called labeling, you would then train the machine. And what the machine will do is learn on its own what is hate speech and what is not. And in doing so, the machine will, by assessing patterns and correlations, will kind of formulate its rules so that it can scale, so that it can generalize, so that once you actually train your machine learning platform through that set of data, you have a system that can now be exposed to data that it has never seen before, but has now the rules in place in order to reliably detect what is hate speech and what is not. So to recap, you need both positive and negative examples of hate speech. You give it to the machine will formulate rules that will allow it to generalize and to actually be able to detect hate speech going forward in new examples of content that has never been exposed to before. Okay, so what we will do is to give you, and we'll do this in 2 rounds, we'll give you a couple of examples of content that would be posted in your social media platform, and we will ask you to do 2 things for us. And we'll do this online through Slido, and you'll see the instructions in shortly. So basically, we're going to ask you two things: to look at the example that is given. It can be a text, or it can be a combination of text and image, and decide firstly if you think that should be allowed, or otherwise it should be deleted from your platform. Basically, is it hate speech or not? And secondly, we will ask you to explain how you reach that decision. So what would be the rule that you formulate that would justify that decision, and that the machine should be using going forward to detect hate speech in similar examples. Then we'll go to round two. Round two is pretty similar to round one, but with one little difference, nuance here. So again, you'll be given two examples of content, and you'll be asked again if this is hate speech or not, if you would allow it or delete it on your platform. And then we would ask you to look at the previous rule that has been formulated on round one and understand if that rule still applies to that example, or you actually need to change it. So basically, if the machine would follow the first rule that you have formulated, would it do a good job at detecting or not that piece of content as hate speech? So basically, if you don't think it does, in what way would you change that rule? Okay. All right. So let me, I'll need now to, I'm going to stop sharing because I need to change to a different presentation. So just give me a second, please. Okay, we're almost there. All right, so okay, so here we go. Can you see now this presentation? Well, I hope you do. I can hear, or
we can't see anything yet, Norberto.
No, that's weird. What about now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. So this is the set of examples that we are going to be giving to you, and that we're going to ask you then those two questions. So first example of content is just text. So in this case, it's not an image combined with text. It's just a text. So basically, someone on your platform uploaded this comment saying, that's because all the atrocities white people have done on the earth, you white people shouldn't even exist, but you do, and your extinction is coming soon. So the first question that we ask you is, would you allow this post on your social media platform, or would you actually delete it? And to do that, we ask you to pick up your phones or on your computers and go to slido.com, or if you want just to put the camera on your phone on the barcode, in order to go to slido.com, and then when it asks you to enter a code, enter DRIF 2021, and you should be able to see this question and also the post. So you can actually enlarge, magnify the post, so it can kind of refreshes your memory, and then we'll ask you to actually decide if you would allow or delete it. So, and I'll ask you also the panelists if they want to do it, so we can have more views and perspectives here. So I'll give you 30 seconds or so. We need to move quickly so I don't take all of the time. Let's see what people would think. Okay, we have 3 people that voted. Let's see if we have some more votes for. Okay, 10 more seconds to see if we have anyone else chiming in. But it looks like the vast majority is on the delete side of things. So this would actually be considered hate speech, and you would not allow it on your platform. Okay, so let's move now to the second question. And here basically is, and this is an open-ended answer, but be concise, but how would you actually explain your decision? So why would you actually delete or allow this type of content? So think about the nature of the post, what the post, what type of population the post is targeting, the tone. So anything that would justify and explain your decision for how we actually should delete this. And this is basically trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the machine and think how the machine, by being exposed to this example and to many other similar examples, what rules would the machine be formulating to actually action upon similar examples going forward? All right, let's have some target. A group of people leans towards genocide. So we have the fact that this specific post is targeting at a group of people and leaning towards genocide would be the rule. And it incites hate against white people would be the rule. Let's see if we get some more. Incites violence. So we have a couple of important thoughts here. You know, the incitement to violence, to hate, targeting specific group of people, namely white people, leaning towards genocide. It's all part of the generic rules that we would determine as justifying our decision to delete it. So this is actually a pretty straightforward example. This is calling basically for white people to not exist, which can obviously be read as a statement to exterminate them, which is actually and obviously a call for violence. So this would be considered hate speech, as we would protect people sharing a protected characteristic, in this case, the race, and we would not be tolerating incitement of violence against that particular race. Okay, so far so good. Let's move. So this would, if we would do the recap of what this generic rule could be, would say inciting violence against any race is hate speech. So, okay, so we have our first decision, we have our first rule. Let's move to the second example. And here we have an image, a photo of someone with this large sign saying deport illegal aliens. Okay, so again, let's go to the Slido question. And what would you do? Would you consider this to be hate speech or not? Would you delete it or would you allow it? So last time we had 5 folks chiming in. Let's see if we can still have those very same 5 to get some votes going on here. All right, we have allow 33. Okay, allow is in the lead now with 60 and delete with 40. So pretty even. Allow has slight margin. Now it's actually, we actually have a tie. So looks like people do not have a consensus on the nature of this post and are divided between allowing or deleting it. Okay, interesting. So let's get some thoughts here, and it's going to be interesting to see how people actually explain their decisions as towards allowing or as towards deleting. So I'll give you a minute or so to just write down quickly how you would actually explain and justify your decision. What would be the rule that the machine should follow when encountering this type of content? Could be a meme. Context is important. Interesting. And very insightful. Context is key in the analysis of this type of content. It discriminates against a specific group of people. It's derogatory. Okay, let's get a couple more. There's no reference to violence, so that could be a way to justify that it should be allowed. It's derogatory, but it's free speech. But at the same time, is dehumanizing the way that the language is used. Aliens can mean immigrants, so I'll delete. All right, so interesting. Couple of thoughts here. One way that we could go about this, and again, this is your social media platform, so you are the ones actually establishing and determining the rules. But as a way that we could go about this is to actually decide that statements about excluding migrants could actually be okay as long as they are illegal migrants. So one could say that this is not hate speech because it's not targeting all migrants, is actually trying to reduce criminality. It could be a statement about excluding them as long as they are illegal. So from a legal standpoint, they should not be there. So we are calling towards their exclusion or deportation. Obviously, this is open for debate, but this could be one way to go about it, that actually allowing this type of speech given this specific rule. But obviously, and as we've seen from others in this event, we could go the other way. But for the time being, let's keep in mind this specific rule as we had also the first rule. And now what we will do is test the waters with the rules that previously we had. So welcome to round 2. You have built your hate speech classifier. It's up and running. It is actioning upon content based on the examples that were given and the rules that were formulated. And now we're going to see how well this hate speech classifier actually works. So again, in round 2, I'm going to give you 2 other examples of content and ask you again if you would consider this to be hate speech or not, and understanding if the rule that we have previously formulated would still do a good job in this specific example, or would we actually need to change, complement it, enrich it, add something to it. Okay, so let's look at the first example of round 2. Again, here we have an image of someone seems to be in protest with this board saying that ending white supremacy starts with killing all white people. But the post is actually from someone that uploaded this photo, but that made this comment, what kind of dingas would advocate for the killing of her own people? So we do have the classifier. The classifier has this rule that basically knows that any form of inciting violence against any race should be considered hate speech. So do take that into account. But let's first take that step back and just have the question, have the decision towards, would you consider this to be hateful or not? So what would you do? Would you actually allow it or would you delete it? So let's see how you vote. All right, seems that the delete is leading. Now a bit less. Okay, let's see if we have, okay. So 5, 7 people voting. Okay, looks like the vast majority, now less, is still with the delete. So you would consider this to be hate speech. Okay, fair enough. We'll get to it. But now let's think about the rule justifying your decision. So does this mean that the rule that we formulated before, inciting violence against any race is hate speech, is doing a good job? So if you just follow that rule, you would actually get to the outcome that you want. Or in this specific case, we would need to tweak that that rule in order to enable the machine to act accordingly in this specific example. So very quickly, just write down what, if you think that this rule still applies, just write down the rule again, or just say that the rule still applies. If you think that actually this rule does not do a good job because you either think that this should be allowed, how would you change that rule? Okay, rule still applies. I think this is coming from the folks that are in favor of deleting this and considering it hate speech. Would be interesting to get the thoughts from the folks that voted actually to allow this type of content. Okay, so rule still applies. It's bad. That any race of people is a solution to correct the problem. Okay, we have some. This is tricky. The picture by itself is hate speech, but the caption suggests that the post is condemning the photo. But this relies on people being able to read between the lines. This is not inciting violence, but still promotes the image. So tweaking the rule to be personally inciting violence. Okay, interesting. All right, so let's look at this example in more detail. So one way that you could go about this is actually understanding that the rule still makes sense. I mean, generally, any content that would be inciting violence against any race should be considered hate speech and should be deleted. But in this case, what we have is that the person that is uploading the photo and making that question, providing that comment, is actually condemning hate speech, right? So the photo in itself and the image in itself, it is hateful, but what the person is doing is almost like making fun of that person, and in that way condemning that person for portraying, conveying that viewpoint and conveying that message. So one way to go about this is actually to allow this post, because we should allow counter speech. We should allow instances of hate speech to be criticized in your platform. So this is beginning to get a little bit trickier. So here, in order for the machine, for the AI system to actually understand that this should be allowed, you should actually feed the machine with enough examples of counter speech, so that the machine will understand that when it has some images that actually are conveying something that should be considered hate speech, it should also look at what the comment is or the question is, and understanding if there is some sort of condemning of that very same image. Because if you don't feed the machine with those examples, the machine will never be able to formulate this rule and would simply delete and not allow this type of content. So any forms of counter speech would most likely not survive the AI filter, because we didn't give the machine those examples that it needed to formulate this rule and then to act accordingly with similar examples. Okay, all right, we're almost there. Let's go to the last example. And here, what we have is an image basically saying that any Muslim refugee caught molesting women or children to be deported immediately. And then it also adds, along with their whole family, share if you agree. So again, take into account the rule that we had before about statements about excluding migrants are okay as long as they are illegal. But first, let's get some thoughts here on the nature of this post. Would you consider it to be hate speech or not? So would you allow it or delete it? This is the last example, so let's make it count. Okay, looks like the vast majority is favoring the delete. Looks like we have more people voting. We're now at 8, which is good. All right. So 88% of you thinks that this is hate speech, should not be allowed on the platform. 89 now. Okay, so think about the previous rule that we had. Statements about excluding migrants are okay as long as they're illegal migrants. This is obviously a rule that would enable that previous example to stay in the platform and not to be deemed hate speech. In this case, the vast majority is actually saying that we should delete it. So how would you change this rule, or what new rule would you have to formulate in order to guide the machine towards the outcome that you think is best here? In this case would be delete. And for those that have actually think that this should be allowed, is this rule perfectly fine, or is there anything that you would tweak it or add it in order to make sure that the machine would act reliably on this type of content? So let's give it a minute to see what thoughts we have here. There's prejudice against a particular religion, targets Muslims, any refugee caught molesting should be deported. This one, does it mean that you would delete it or you would allow it? So it's targeting a specific group of people, but it's saying that refugee that were caught doing this should be deported. So does that mean you would allow it or you delete it? Think about the nature of the behavior of the group that is being targeted, and how that would be lawfully or unlawfully, and would that make a difference towards allowing or not this type of post? I will delete it because it targets Muslims and their families. Deportation is already not a good thing, but it is to believe that we only stigmatize a race, preventing them from doing something that we allow another race or ethnicity to do. This exception to this rule will be where it references innocent people, including but not limited to families, children. So interesting. So here we start getting into the nuances of how more granular this rule should be. When we talk about targeting migrants, a group of people, in this case, it would be illegal one. So we have a very narrow subset of that group of population. How things would change if you're actually expanding them to their families that not necessarily at all are also committing anything illegal or unlawful. So that's interesting. Society or country with strict rule against violation against women will definitely not tolerate any race to violate, but expelling the family is not okay by me. Okay, so interesting thoughts here. Again, this is your social media platform. This will be your rule. So as long as you are coherent in the way that you're enforcing it, this is what we're getting at. So I'm not getting at how sound the rule should be in itself. I'm just giving you examples that showcase the challenge that your company would face when coming up with a decision for these examples and training a machine to act on those examples and similar examples at scale. So here, one way, again, to go about it is to understand that calling for the deportation of sexually abusive Muslims would not be a violation, since we do not want to protect a criminal subset. So you could see that is a statement also about safety, and it's about condemning also the behavior that they have, and not necessarily just the fact that this is a specific group. So if we would keep the rule, not saying it should, but if we keep the rule, we would need to actually train the machine to understand that there are certain expressions that would signify an illegal activity. So if we don't actually have the addition of this nuance to the rule, the machine would only be seeking the specific reference to illegal in texts and images. So it needs to be more nuanced and understanding that molesting women or children is illegal, is unlawful. So we would need to add to that rule. But we've run this example in previous workshops, and there's a lot of debate around this. I'm not getting into the content policy rules, but I do understand the argument about the tone of this, the image, also the fact that is involving the whole family. So there is some manifestation of hate towards that specific group that just goes beyond the nature of the activity of that criminal subset. So this is tricky, but this could be one way to go about it. So I'll end my presentation just with a couple of thoughts on how we as a company are going towards are labeling this type of content, and what safeguards do we have in place. So let me just give me a second again. I need to change the presentation. I'll be very, very brief. Okay, so let me see. Hopefully you can see this now. So very quickly, what I think is interesting is the how humans and AI in this process of content moderation are kind of reinforcing one another. So if we start with the fact that the policies, the community standards are actually written by humans, by us, based on principles, and then we have another users in your platform submitting reports, and then we act according to that policy. So that's how it would work without AI. Once we have AI, and we train AI to do the reporting for us, so we don't actually need necessarily to have the users of the platform flagging and reporting that content. What we have is that the AI will poke holes on the policy. It will find gaps because of the examples that was trained on, and this could raise some interesting angles towards the assessment of that content that humans did not think about it before. So actually through AI, we can actually iterate and improve the community standards, because the AI, by doing this automated reporting, might test the soundness and reliability of the system, and will force us to rethink about the principles and how we frame them, and how that should be fed into an improvement of the community standards. So there's kind of a feedback loop where AI can actually help humans improve those policies. Another thing is to understand how things are evolving. And before, we would see that machines would be really good at the extreme and very straightforward and evident, self-evident examples of hate speech. So they would do a good job when something is unquestionably and easily deemed as hate speech or not hate speech. And then once we get to the nuance of the way that is framed, the combination of text and images, counter speech, sarcasm, irony, humor, all of that specific context or circumstances related to a specific region, that's where people are better than the machines, and that we're good at understanding those nuances. But what has happened is that as we train these machines with those examples, with those borderline examples, what we see is that the AI and machine learning acquire the capability, the ability to actually understand those nuances, and they become better and better at reliably also flagging those hard examples that before they were not capable to do. So if we look, for example, again, going back to the community standards enforcement report, when we see of all of the action of the content that has been actioned for hate speech in our platform, having 97% of it being done by machines, obviously it demonstrates how we're getting better at leveraging this technology to also capture those hard examples. Obviously, and I'll be very quick, in order to do this responsibly, there are a number of important safeguards and processes that we need to put in place. First of all, it is imperative to look at the quality of the data that is being used to train the machines. Again, the examples, if we don't find enough examples of counter speech, the machine simply will not be able to detect that type of content. So it is very important to have high quality data that would capture and cover the different nuances regarding human language and images related to hate speech. Also, the process of labeling. So we saw that there was a lot of division here within this group to understand if it was hate speech or not hate speech. So we do need to also have specialized labelers. So people that are asked to determine if that example is hate speech or not. This is what we call the ground truth. So they will formulate and label those examples that then would be given to the machine. And the more specialized they are about understanding hate speech and its nuances and local context, the better and the more sound and reliable the machine will be. Also understanding that those labelers need to operate with specific guidelines to ensure consistency. So it's not only about having that specialization, it's also having a set of guidelines that will enable different labelers to reach the same decision so that we don't have discrepancies and divergences into the way that we're labeling the data sets. Gerald will get into this, but obviously this is all complemented by a team of human reviewers, a global team that operates around the clock, that is specialized in different languages and with knowledge of cultural and specific local context, which is key for us to be able to deploy this type of content moderation at scale. And last slide, just a kind of a recap of how the hate speech classifier would work and how this is actually a demonstration of teamwork between humans and machines. All starts with humans. Humans are the ones that are populating your social media platform, are the ones that are posting the content. Once that content is posted and uploaded to the platform, you have this AI machine learning systems that will assess that content and would flag content for human review in the case, for example, if it's hate speech. So we do have human reviewers, moderators that will act upon what the machine has flagged and then make a final decision, either to delete it or to allow it. Again, we will have another important human element in the process where users can actually appeal that decision. And what happens is once we go through that appeal process and we kind of confirm or not the view of the moderators, we get to a very reliable set of examples of content that is deemed to be hate speech or not. And we will use those examples again to train the AI system. So there's a sort of like feedback loop here again through this teamwork of humans and machines and understanding and reliably if something is hate speech or not. That will give that ground truth, those good examples that we need to keep training and further teaching the AI systems to keep doing a good job. Okay, that's it for me. I don't know if there are specific questions or we move to Gerald and have questions at the end. I'm fine with both, but thanks for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Roberto, for that I would call fascinating presentation, helping us to deconstruct AI, and how it works in practice, and then trying to share also the practical complexities of how you then use that on the platform, and then taking us through those examples that people had to sort of pitch in to decide on how they will go about moderating their platforms. Thank you so much for that. Next, we'll move on to, as Roberto already signaled, we'll move on to Gerald, who will be taking us through how we go about content moderation and, of course, how we then use our community standards as a foundation for that. Gerald?
Thanks so much. I don't know if everyone can see my screen. If you
Yes, we
can, please do
can,
let me know.
but it's
Okay.
really small. I don't know if
Small.
it's me. Maybe it's my system.
Is anyone else having the same issue? Okay. So I'll go ahead then. I'm Gerald Soa. I'm from the content policy team. And I'd like to first give a big thanks to Norberto for that great first presentation. I think he alluded to many of the points that I would also be hitting on. As he noted, AI is a critical part of our enforcement strategy to remove harmful content from our platform. And this strategy is guided by our community standards, which is the guidance set of rules or principles by which we remove harmful content on the platform. My presentation today will be focusing on how we think about developing these policies and these rules, and also would focus on our hate speech policy, which Norberto took us through an interesting quiz. So as some of you might be aware, Facebook's mission is to build community and bring the world closer together. I think this is quite true in Africa and in Nigeria, specifically where we've seen Facebook being used as a tool by individuals, by communities, and by businesses to bridge gaps, to connect with one another, and to grow collectively together in strength. And that's the mission that we're committed to, and that's what we hope that the platform does for our users around the world. Our products serve about 3 billion people worldwide, and this translates into billions of stories, billions of messages, billions of thoughts and ideas that are shared every minute, every hour, every day of the week. And I say this not for any other reason than to help you picture or contextualize the scale at which we operate. This should give you a sense of the fact that on any given day, there's a lot of content being shared. And whereas the majority of this is benign content, there's always harmful content on the platform. So we develop policies to be able to filter through this and remove as much of the harmful content as possible using a combination of human review and the AI that Norberto just spoke to. As noted earlier, I'm from the content policy team, and this team is made up of incredible individuals from around the world, and they're based across offices globally from Singapore to San Francisco. The team has been intentionally crafted to be diverse, not just in terms of our individual ideological and philosophical backgrounds, but also our professional and cultural backgrounds as well. So for example, myself, I'm from Ghana, and I used to work in the civil service in Ghana specifically before moving to Facebook. And I have colleagues that come from a broad range of backgrounds, from law enforcement to academia, to public policy itself and international development. And this approach to crafting a diverse team is quite intentional. The firm realizes that our users come from different backgrounds as well and have different philosophical perspectives. So it's very important that the team that is tasked to develop the rules that guide what we allow and don't allow as far as content is concerned reflects this rich diversity that is out there. So the community standards is sort of our guide rule or our guidebook for what we allow and don't allow as far as content is concerned on the platform. These are published publicly on facebook.com/community standards. I think each and every one of us knows individuals within our circles who have either had comments or posts or accounts enforced on, and there's always been this sense of mystery as to what exactly is guiding these decisions. So if you're ever curious as to what influenced an enforcement outcome, I do encourage you, or those in your respective circles, to check out the community standards online, and you'll get a good detailed sense of what we allow and don't allow and how that sometimes impacts the enforcement of content online. It's also worth noting, I think I should flag, that the community standards are a global set of policies which apply everywhere and in every context. So whether it's Nigeria or in Ghana, where I'm from, or in Sweden or in the United States or Singapore, it's this exact same set of policies that applies to every single user who uses our Facebook and Instagram products. We've done this because we believe this is the fairest way to do this. As many of you are aware, there are so many inequities associated with internet usage and access, and taking a siloed approach to content moderation only sharpens or widens this divide between the haves and have-nots. So in order to overcome that sort of barrier, and also for the purposes of operability and to ensure that we're removing as much harmful content as possible, we have just one set of rules that applies in every community around the world. Our community standards cover a wide range of abuses. This is in recognition of the fact that many of our users who do abuse our platform abuse it in different ways. So our community standards cover things from fraud and deception to hate speech to graphic violence to regulated goods and bullying and harassment. So whereas a piece of content we report might not violate our hate speech policies, it might violate our violence and incitement policies, for instance. So it's good to keep in mind that all the different abuse areas that you see in the community standards work together to keep the platform safe. And I'm sure you're curious as to how we think about developing policies and what sort of principles guide the set of policies in our community standards. Contrary to some claims, we don't just come up with this at whim. There's a lot of deliberation, there's a lot of intent and care and consideration that is put into thinking through what goes into the community standards. We're guided by three key principles. The first is that we believe that each and every single policy in our community standards needs to be principled. We're guided by principles of voice, of dignity, of privacy, of safety, and authenticity when thinking about making the policies as principled as possible. What this means is that as far as voice is concerned, which is our key principle, that we believe that each and every user should have a platform to share what's on their mind, to connect with others, and to communicate and dialogue as they please. But in giving people voice, we also recognize the realities of the world we live in, and that some would abuse this privilege and take advantage of their right to voice to harm and abuse others. And we realize that this can be intimidating and this can create a sense of exclusion, which then goes counter to our key mission of bringing people together and helping them build community. We also want to make sure that the policy is operable, and this is what connects the most to Norberto's presentation, in that given that we operate at such a huge scale with billions of users and billions of pieces of content shared on a regular basis, we need to ensure that the policies that we implement are suited for operability. They need to be suited for human review, in that content reviewers are in a good position to refer to the policies to remove harmful content, but also for automation and AI review, so that our systems and technology can expeditiously and quickly remove harmful content before it's shared with our users. The last but not least is that our policies also need to be explicable. This is rooted in our commitment to transparency. Since 2018, we've not only shared our community standards with the general public, but we've shared the details of each and every single policy we develop at our policy forum. Our community standards enforcement report also goes into the granular details of the extent to which we enforce through human review and automation. So we try to be as transparent and as clear and concise as possible, so that our users have a good reference point in understanding exactly what we're doing to keep them safe on our products. When developing our policies, we take an approach that's quite dynamic. This is in recognition of the fact that language changes quite quickly and culture changes quite regularly as well. So I'm Ghanaian, and I think this is quite similar to those in Nigeria, where with language, taking Pidgin English, for instance, there's a lot of change in the slang, in the terminology, in the phrases, in the way people show love, in the way people show hate on a regular basis. So being mindful of the language dynamism and also the dynamic nature in which culture changes regularly, we routinely and regularly review our policies and ensure that they are at the right place and that they are serving the purpose that they're intended for. So every 2 weeks, we have something called the Policy Forum. This is a forum where everyone at Facebook can join and discuss the policy issue at hand. So it could be a policy that we're looking at around cultural nudity or around attacks against religious concepts. And everyone at Facebook, regardless of their team, regardless of where they're based, can chip in with opinions as to how they think that policy can be shaped. But I thought I'd take a minute or two to talk through what happens before a policy gets the policy forum. What we do in thinking about developing a policy and getting feedback is that we consult extensively with our teams within Facebook. So this is our process teams that have an understanding of how to operationalize a policy. By operationalize, I mean how to scale it widely for our users' benefit. We work closely with legal, with our comms teams, with our public policy teams around the world. We work very closely as well with our market specialists who are experts on the various markets that they cover. So for instance, with Africa, we have market specialists across the continent who have a good understanding of the cultural and linguistic nuances across various markets. We get their feedback on the policy issue that we're looking at and complement it with the feedback we get from external experts. So if you take something like attacks against religious concepts, for instance, there are some people who have spent their life working on free speech advocacy issues. There are academic experts that have done tons of research on linguistic nuance. There are human rights advocates and users who belong to communities that are affected by this speech around the world that we need to consult with and get their feedback on so that we can be in a good place to craft policies that best reflect the tensions at play around the world, so that we're allowing as much voice as possible while accounting for safety at the same time. Once this feedback is consolidated and the policy proposal has been crafted, that's when it goes to the policy forum and is shared with the firm, as I mentioned earlier, for their feedback and input. And based on their input, we might either choose to pass a policy and launch it through the community standards, or wait and do further research if the firm and our stakeholders internally are displeased with the recommendation at hand. The policy I'll be focusing on next is our hate speech policy. Norberto took you through an interesting quiz to get a sense of how you think about hate speech and how you think this should be enforced through the lens of AI, but I'll be speaking through the policy in its rawest form. So for us, limiting hate speech is a key priority as it's tied to the mission that we're committed to as a firm. We want to bring the world together. We want them to build community and bridge gaps. And the presence and existence of hate speech causes a lot of friction in achieving that mission. So we know that this type of speech creates an environment of intimidation, it creates an environment of exclusion, and in some cases, it also promotes offline violence. Ultimately, for us, hate speech is defined as direct attacks against people rather than concepts or institutions on the basis of what we call protected characteristics. So attacks against people based on race, ethnicity, national origin, disability, religious affiliation, caste, sexual orientation, sex, gender identity, and serious disease. Attacks for us refers to violent attacks against individuals. So this could be a call for violence against a particular ethnic group, or dehumanizing speech. This could be comparing people of a particular nationality to something that's considered dehumanizing. So saying that all Ghanaians are baboons, for instance, would be a violation of our hate speech policy. Then there's also statements of inferiority. That's content that describes or refers to people based on their people as inferior based on their protected characteristics, as well as calls for exclusion or segregation. And we saw the interesting tensions at play when this is expressed in the context of immigration through Norberto's quiz. Please bear in mind that we want to allow for open discussion and to raise awareness, and for people to be able to raise awareness about hate speech. So for instance, if you do see hate speech on the platform and you share it in a condemnation on awareness raising context, this is something that would not violate our policies. We believe that it's important to take account the context and intent of the content being shared. So we allow reshares and shares of such posts when it's clear that condemnation and an awareness raising is present. As noted, we also allow people to be critical of concepts and institutions tied to protected characteristics such as religion. So a good example will be posts criticizing Christianity for its role in the colonization of African countries. That's something we would allow. However, if that same piece of content veered off course and attacked Christians specifically, so let's say said, I think all Christians should be killed because of their role in the colonization of Africa, then that's something that we would consider hate speech. But if it's just critical of the institutional role in that event or that part of our history or in any other context, that's something that we would allow on the platform. I have two examples here, one by a user in Nigeria and the other by a user in Ethiopia. The first is a dehumanizing comparison example that compares Northerners in Nigeria to cattle and says that they have cow brains. That's a violation of our hate speech policies. The other is a post that calls on others to commit violence against the Tigray people of Ethiopia. And this is also something that's in violation of our hate speech policies. So looking at these two, in addition to the quiz that you went through with Nobeto, I'm hoping that that gives you a sense of what we allow and don't allow as far as hate speech is concerned. Now, I know some of you might be curious about the process behind reporting content and how content is reviewed more broadly. So I'll be speaking to that as well. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out once the Q&A session starts. With reporting content, there are a few things to note. First of all, I would like to encourage you to report content when you do see it. Reporting rates in Sub-Saharan Africa are quite low. So we do encourage people to report as much as possible, as that helps keep the general community as safe as we can keep it. But please do know that every single piece of content on Facebook can be reported. So pages can be reported as well as posts, comments, profiles, photos, even events can be reported on the platform. And it's also worth noting that reporting once is enough. I think there's this misconception that you need to report something several times before it's actioned on. So many of you might have seen situations where users will say, somebody is doing XYZ, all of you go and report him or her so that Facebook does something. What happens really is that just one piece of report or one content report is enough for us to gain attention needed to be able to review the content. The last thing to note also is that all reports are confidential. So we never let others know that you've reported their post. We try to keep that confidential as possible to give people the freedom and the privacy they need to be able to report and keep their user experience as enjoyable as possible. This is a mock-up of the reporting flow, and I'll just quickly take you through this. Unfortunately, I can't see everyone, but I would have loved to see a show of hands of anyone who has reported content. But basically, when you have a post or you come across a post that you would like to report, there would be a 3-dotted prompt at the corner of the post that you can click on that then gives you the drop-down option of reporting the comment or the post that you seek to report, similar to what's in the first image. And once that's clicked, you get a set of options to guide us to understand what type of content you're trying to report. So this might be hate speech, it might be nudity, it might be bullying. Please do click the option that you think best aligns with the content that you're seeing. If you're uncertain, please do feel free to look at the community standards to get a sense of what each policy means. Once you click on the abuse area that is most connected to the report you're trying to send through, you would get the option of reporting the content at the end. What happens then is that it will be sent through a queue for review by our content reviewers around the world. This is intended to give you a sense of what happens when content is reported. People can report pages, profiles, individual posts, photos, as mentioned earlier. And as you know, we use a mix of automated technology and human review to review content more broadly. The first step in the process is the technology in which we use, as Norberto pointed out. Like, we proactively detect harmful content and, where possible, automatically remove it before users see it. And we've come a very long way in that we're removing the bulk of the harmful content shared on the platform before users even get to see it. But in the off chance that something does filter through our automated systems, and it's eventually reported by one of our users, it's taken through human review. And with this, we filter through the reports quickly to sort of deduplicate reports that have several reports. Our system prioritizes reports that have to do with certain urgent risks, for instance, terrorism or child exploitation and pornography, for instance, to give that the most urgent attention. But more broadly, we try to filter through the reports as quickly as possible to ensure that we're enforcing on the content in as short a time as we can. The action that the reviewer takes would either determine whether the content would be left up or would be removed. And if removed, we do now have an appeals process that gives users the opportunity to appeal the decision if they feel like the decision taken was unfair or incorrect. It's worth noting that we have 24/7 coverage for content review around the world. So it's not a case where if you report a post in Nigeria, we have to wait several hours for somebody in the United States or the UK to wake up to review the post. In every continent, including Sub-Saharan Africa, we have a content moderation team that reviews content 24/7. And despite the fact that there are hundreds of languages around the world which our users use, we currently cover more than 50 languages, and that number is quickly growing. Each of our reviewers make sure to take into account the local context. So, for instance, if you're in Sub-Saharan Africa, our Sub-Saharan African reviewers try to apply that local context when reviewing the content as well. Thank you very much. I'm handing over to Olalade and looking forward to any questions that might come up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerald, for taking us through the really robust process and the deep thought that goes through how we go about developing our community standards. How we engage internally as well as externally to be able to frame and shape those community standards. I don't know if anyone has any particular questions, but I have a question. So in case nobody has a question, I will ask. And that's really echoing the question Gerald already had, asking if anyone had ever reported any content and what the experience is. So if anyone wants to share that, would really like to hear about it. Anybody? I see someone raising up their hands. MC, please go ahead.
Hi, good day. I will keep my mic off. I just have a question, an experience that I work for the Namibian Broadcasting Corporation's online department. And something that we experience is that we have people called the Obahimba people in Namibia. And according to Facebook standard, nudity is something that is not, nudity policies stand. However, with the community that we have, we do stories that pertain to things like maternal health, education, and when you film such people, you have no choice as a public broadcaster to film them in their natural surrounding. But what we have experienced is that we would post our videos, they would be taken off. However, broadcasters, big broadcasters such as the BBC and the rest would post the similar videos, but they will not be taken off. So I'm worried a bit about the discrimination, especially when we are teaching machines to receive certain data and how this data sort of works in different geographical areas. So perhaps maybe you can touch a bit on that, and that's sort of an experience that we have as journalists. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the question. This is something that we are always looking at. As I mentioned earlier, our policies are quite dynamic and we are always looking at it for opportunities to make adjustments and improve where necessary. With cultural nudity, we've consulted quite extensively on what the right line should be. When we made the decision to review our policies around cultural nudity, we extended invitations to experts throughout the world, including in Sub-Saharan Africa and in communities such as those that you referenced, to get their opinion on what they felt we should be doing with that type of content. And the overwhelming feedback actually from experts of nudity and art and that type of engagement from Sub-Saharan Africa in particular was that there are three concerns. One, around consent. A lot of people had past concerns about the lack of consent on that type of imagery. You have tourists coming into some of these communities, taking pictures and using them in ways that the users have not consented to. There were also concerns around determining who is and who isn't a minor in some of these situations. So we have contexts where minors who would not want that sort of imagery of themselves out there because they are minors, having that imagery on our platform for circulation. And the last was also the predatory gaze through which some of this content is shared. There's been a lot of what experts deemed as toxic colonial discourse or engagement around cultural nudity in Sub-Saharan Africa in particular, where you have individuals, sometimes institutions, engaging with this type of imagery in ways that are not worthy of the dignity of the individuals being depicted. And when factoring all these feedback together, the best approach was to continue removing cultural nudity, even though our intent was to consider the possibility of moving the line, because in Sub-Saharan Africa, more than in any other region, there was a lot of pushback and hesitation to do that. That being said, this is not a disregard for the fact that this is their culture and they are mindful of that and that they are fully proud of it and would like to embrace it as fully as possible. But we are aware of the risks around consent, around the exchange and sharing of minor nude images, and also around the compromisation of dignity, especially when the colonial gaze is factored into play.
Thank you so much, Gerald, for your response. MC, can I take it that you're satisfied with the response, or do you have any follow-up questions?
Actually, I just wanted to find out then, because for us in Namibia specifically, because we deal with the San community and the Himba community, this is an urgent matter. As much as I know that Facebook is trying and that they need as much data as possible, perhaps maybe work with journalists in Namibia as well, because we do see these images remain for bigger broadcast organizations, and we try to reach out to Facebook all the time. It's impossible to reach out to Facebook because there's no way. You can try to give in your suggestion as to why a specific video should remain. As a public broadcaster, as a national broadcaster, we mainly deal with issues that deal with...
it's almost impossible to reach them.
Deal with issues that deal with education and maternal health. And these are very important issues, especially during COVID. So when most of these videos get taken down, we risk people losing out on very valuable information. I thank you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the pain points raised. As noted, we have teams dedicated to stakeholder engagement. So as we continue to engage on how to craft our policies, this is something that would inevitably keep in mind. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Thank you, Gerald. I think we have...
Hello.
Yes, Lord Kweku Seki.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much for your presentation, Gerard. I'm also in Ghana, and I think this is a very timely intervention. I really wanted to get in touch with someone from Facebook so that we have a discussion. This morning I just spoke to one public figure, one very popular musician who has issues with Facebook, and he's done whatsoever. He's done a lot in the past just to have someone to resolve his issue for him. And it has been in vain. I just spoke with him. That's Lord Kenya. I hope you know him. And I just spoke with him this morning, and I'm so happy that I'm in touch with I'm in this conversation today. That's why I've typed that I need Gerard's contact. I actually talked to Ame Odabra, who's one of the top bloggers in Ghana about this, and he also couldn't get me anybody from Facebook. So I hope Gerard leaves his contact or something so that I get in touch with him and we talk about some of these things. But it still stands that they are almost impossible to reach, and it's very frustrating when you have certain issues which can be solved very simply by individuals, and it's almost impossible to reach them. So I hope that they set up offices in some of these countries, because they are generating a lot of revenue from Africa. All our companies and organizations, churches, all of them, they are sponsoring their content. So it means there's a lot of revenue that they are getting from Africa. So I think they should also have their service, support centers and teams, easily accessible to us so that we can reach them. Thank you very much, Gerard, and I hope we can, get in touch after this, please. I'm also a journalist in Ghana.
Thank you, Lord Kweku. I just have one question, just to clarify. So the issues that you're referencing, are they content related, or what exactly are these issues?
Yes, content related, and sometimes, a simple hacking of, people's, in this musician's case, he's a very popular musician in Ghana. His account was hacked, and he's been used to stream wildlife videos, for a very long time. And, he has the numbers, and he's so worried. He's written to Facebook for a very long time, and they don't mind him. And he's so frustrated. He talked to me just this morning, and he's a very popular person in Ghana. He won the Artist of the Year, the best musician in Ghana, and he can't get in touch with Facebook. Just this simple thing. What about the ordinary people? You know what I mean? So, and also when it comes to reporting content, hate speech, and all those things, I think their AI is so rigid with some of these things. So sometimes you need you need to break it down. You need to, and sometimes too, I think there's issues with language, and when a video is streamed and it's hate speech in a local Ghanaian language or local African language, how do they take it off? Or even when we flag them, they don't care, because it seems hate speech only matters to them in English or French or whatever. They don't care when it's in the African language. And these are some other stuff that I would like to get in touch personally with him and we talk it out.
Thank you. Gerald, do you want to respond?
Sure. The question around language, I think, is a pervasive one, right? Like, we have millions of users around the world who speak multiple languages. I think in Ghana specifically, we speak close to 50 languages. Nigeria speaks hundreds of languages, same with Congo. So you can imagine there's a bit of friction. And though we've made a lot of improvement in hiring reviewers with language capacity, so for instance, we're covering so many languages like Hausa, Yoruba, Amharic, Tigray, Zulu, Xhosa, like a wide range of languages. There's still a lot of improvement that we can make in ensuring that we're getting reviewers of as many languages as possible. But this is a journey, given how huge of a challenge that would be. So it's criticism and feedback that we take in good stride. The other thing that I'd like to address is the fact that we prioritize English and French reports. That's not the case. I think by virtue of the world that we live in, having been colonized as we are, English and French and Spanish, for instance, are some of the most widely spoken languages. So most of the users on our platform will be engaging in those languages. And as a result, there's just better capacity for that. But that is not to say that that's the full stop. It's more of a comma as we continue to expand the scope. And then the feedback around being able to flag consent with your account or content is, again, something that's also top of mind. So we have an appeals process, and we recently introduced the oversight board, both of which are channels through which you can either seek as additional review of content or seek some sort of redress or attention around content that you think is not properly aligned with where the policies should be. I'm mindful that these two might not be suitable all the time. And again, this is feedback that we get and we are trying to improve on. But there are some avenues that are there that we're trying to hone and refine. I'm happy to also leave the details of the public policy team that engages with journalists in Ghana and across West Africa, and they might be able to help support some of the concerns that you've raised.
Thank you so much, Gerald. Does anybody have any other question or comments, especially experiences with reporting previously? Okay, looks like everyone is happy. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gerald, for your presentation and the questions and taking us through how deeply we think about or we go about developing our community standards. Yeah, thank you so much to everyone for joining us for this session. We hope that you've learned a lot about AI in general and also the complexities of using AI to address issues. Of course, we picked hate speech in this instance, but of course there are other areas in which you can also illustrate these complexities. Yeah, thank you so much for participating, and we look forward to engaging on other in other contexts and in other circumstances around this and similar issues. Thank you very much.